Have you ever wanted something so incredibly badly that you tried to literally think it into existence?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like maybe it was a massive promotion at work or uh, finding the perfect apartment in a city where that just feels impossible.
Or even just, snagging a prime parking spot right by the door on a freezing cold day.
Yes, exactly. You just sit there gripping the steering wheel, squeezing your eyes shut, and you just beam that thought out into the world, hoping reality will somehow bend to your will.
It is such a deeply human habit.
It really is. We've all done it. But what if someone told you that this wasn't just a quirky, desperate habit, but like an actual measurable law of physics?
Which is just a deeply tantalizing proposition. I
Mhm.
mean, the idea that your mind is not just processing your physical reality,
Yeah.
but is the sole active architect of it.
Right. So, today for this deep dive, we are taking a massive look at the book and the cultural phenomenon that sold that exact promise to the entire world.
We are talking about Rhonda Byrne's mega bestseller, The Secret.
Exactly. Our mission here is to distill the core teachings of this incredibly famous book and uncover exactly how it managed to capture the global imagination so completely.
And then, importantly, we are going to objectively weigh its very bold claims.
Yeah, we want to see how this holds up when you put it under the microscope of actual psychology, and
Right.
we'll look at the heavy critiques it has faced from multiple, wildly different angles.
Because the cross-section of sources we have to work with today is incredibly diverse, which really helps give us the 360-degree view
Yeah.
of the whole phenomenon.
Yeah, to give you an idea of the stack of material we are pulling from, we have a recent academic paper from the Cultura International Journal of Philosophy, a theological critique published by the Banner of Truth, historical production and financial data from Wikipedia, a pro-secret historical overview from the personal development site Transformind, and a wonderfully fiery, expletive-laden takedown by the author Mark Manson.
It is quite the mix of perspectives.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because it all started with a moment of profound personal grief that somehow ended up sparking an empire.
Right, so to understand the genesis of The Secret, you really have to understand the vulnerable psychological state Rhonda Byrne was in back in 2004.
Which was pretty dark. Right.
Very. According to the historical overview from Transformind, her life had essentially collapsed. She was grieving the sudden death of her father, she was facing total physical exhaustion from overwork, and she was on the absolute brink of financial ruin.
Wow.
Yeah, she described herself as being in a state of total despair.
Which, I mean, that is a place so many people can relate to. When you hit absolute rock bottom like that, your brain is practically screaming for a lifeline.
Exactly. You were just looking for some semblance of control over a chaotic world.
And it was in that very dark, desperate place that her daughter handed her a book.
Yeah, it was a rather obscure, much older book from 1910 called The Science of Getting Rich by a man named Wallace D. Wattles.
Right, and Burns says that as she read it, something just clicked. She described it as a literal flame igniting inside her heart.
And from there, the sources note she went on an absolute tear.
Yeah, she spent the next 2.5 weeks devouring hundreds of books, listening to audio tapes, and scouring the internet.
Which is just a manic level of research.
It really is. It was an obsessive deep dive born out of necessity.
And from that frenetic 2.5-week research binge, she claimed to have traced a great secret back through history, all the way to 3500 BC.
Right.
She claimed to find threads of it in various philosophies, religions, and the habits of history's greatest minds. And the core thesis she arrived at, which became the entire foundation of her movie and subsequent book, is something called the law of attraction.
Yes, the law of attraction. This is the big concept that just totally took over the culture.
It did.
At its most basic, from what I read in the text, Byrne claims that everything in the universe, and she always capitalizes universe, by the way, vibrates on a specific frequency. And the governing principle of the cosmos is that like attracts like. Therefore, your thoughts, which she claims also emit a literal frequency, determine your destiny.
That is the fundamental mechanism she proposes. I mean, if you think about wealth, you are emitting a wealth frequency, and you will physically attract wealth to you.
Okay.
If you constantly worry about debt, you are emitting a debt frequency, and you will attract more bills and financial hardship.
Right. So when I was reading through this, I had to stop and ask myself how literal she was being.
Very literal.
Yeah, because it sounds like she's telling readers they can treat the universe like a giant cosmic mail order catalog.
That is actually a great way to put it.
Right. The implication is that I can just sit on my couch, close my eyes, visualize a red sports car, And because I'm vibrating at a red sports car frequency, the universe is obligated to deliver it to my driveway. So is she saying we can treat the universe like a giant cosmic mail order catalog? Do I just place an order for a sports car?
According to the source material, yes. That is not an exaggeration of her claims at all. There is no metaphor intended.
Wow, really?
Really. Both the Wikipedia source and the religious critique highlight that the book literally promises unlimited joy, health, money, and youth. Byrne's exact claim, quoting the text directly here, is that you can have, be, or do anything. She tells the reader point blank, you are the master of the universe.
Master of the universe. I mean, that is a staggering promise to make to someone who might be, struggling to pay their rent or deal with a chronic illness.
It is a massive promise.
And clearly, that level of ultimate empowerment sold. I mean, the business reality of this franchise is undeniable.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, the Wikipedia data shows the DVD and the book grossed over $65 million. At one point, The Secret was actually outselling the final Harry Potter book.
Which is wild. So passing a global fiction phenomenon with a self-help book is a rare feat in publishing history.
A massive part of that momentum was the Oprah Winfrey effect. 2 entire episodes of her show were dedicated to it, and that served as a cultural rocket ship.
Okay.
But even before Oprah got a hold of it, the marketing strategy was brilliant. The creators gave it this whole Da Vinci Code aesthetic.
Yes, the quill and ink fonts.
Exactly. The faux parchment paper pages, the wax seals on the cover. It wasn't presented as just another self-help guide.
Right. It was packaged to trigger our deep human desire for forbidden insider knowledge. They made you feel like you were being initiated into an ancient secret society.
Yeah, it felt exclusive. But what's funny is the irony of that massive success. It's quite striking when you look at its origins.
It really is. The film project was initially pitched to Australia's Channel 9 network and was flatly rejected.
Wait, they rejected The Secret?
They did. The executives looked at the early cuts and told the producers that the concept lacked broad mass appeal.
Well, it's safe to say Channel 9 profoundly misjudged the public's appetite for this.
They certainly did, but what's fascinating here is that the producers were savvy enough to pivot. Well, the historical sources note that the concept of the law of attraction is not new at all. It is heavily based on the 19th century New Thought movement.
Oh, right, the older philosophy.
Exactly. However, the creators of The Secret intentionally repackaged that older New Thought philosophy, which historically focused more on spiritual healing and internal peace, to focus almost exclusively on material wealth enhancement.
Ah, they knew what people wanted.
Yes. One of the financial backers explicitly stated that they wanted to reach the masses, and they knew that money is the primary anxiety and desire of the masses.
Well, so they identified the ultimate pain point and offered a magical cure.
Basically, yes.
And they bolstered this with a ton of perceived proof in the form of celebrity manifestation stories. Our sources highlight several of these anecdotes that have essentially become modern mythology.
They're very famous stories.
Yeah, you have Jim Carrey, long before he was a household name, driving up to Mulholland Drive and writing himself a physical check for $10 million for acting services rendered. He kept it in his wallet, and years later, he gets paid exactly $10 million for his role in Dumb and Dumber.
That is perhaps the most famous piece of narrative evidence cited by law of attraction proponents.
Then you have Conor McGregor, the UFC fighter. He talked openly about practicing manifestation by visualizing prime parking spaces at the mall with his girlfriend.
Start small, right?
Yeah, and then scaling that exact same mental practice up to manifest UFC World Championship belts.
Wow.
And there's a really recent one from the Cultura Journal source regarding Indian cricketer Rinku Singh. Before the 2025 Asia Cup tournament even began, he wrote the words "win run" on a piece of paper.
Okay.
Weeks later, he actually hits the winning runs in the final match of the tournament.
See, these stories are incredibly sticky. They provide a compelling narrative that the system works at the highest levels of success.
They really do. Now, if you're listening to this and rolling your eyes at the idea of a vibrating universe responding to Post-it notes, well, you aren't alone.
Definitely not.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I want to ask you this. If the metaphysical claims are just magical thinking, why do so many people, including highly rational, successful people, swear up and down that these practices change their lives?
Well, the sources indicate there is actual science at play here, just not the science Rhonda Byrne claimed.
Okay, explain that.
This is where we transition from mysticism to hard psychology. The academic paper from the Cultura Journal points out that while the metaphysical claims lack scientific backing, The actual practices suggested by The Secret often do yield results.
Really? So it does work, just differently.
Yes, the mechanism just isn't cosmic, it's neurological.
Hmm.
It comes down to a network in your brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
Oh, yes, I saw the Cultura paper mention the RAS. From what I gather, it basically acts like a bouncer for your brain's sensory input.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
Right, because your brain is getting hit with millions of bits of data every second. Sights, sounds, background noise. If you processed all of it consciously, you would overload. So the RAS stands at the door and only lets in the VIP information, right?
Yes. And what dictates the VIP list for the RAS? Your dominant thoughts and goals.
Oh, I see.
When you consciously and repeatedly obsess over a specific goal like getting a new job or finding investors for a business, you are programming that filter. Suddenly, your brain starts noticing resources, overheard conversations, and subtle opportunities that were always present in your environment, but that your RAS previously blocked out because they weren't deemed relevant.
It's like putting on a pair of specially tinted glasses.
Exactly.
If you put on opportunity glasses, you suddenly see all these networking chances you previously walked right past. The universe didn't magically spawn new opportunities. Your brain just finally decided they were important enough to highlight.
And Mark Manson, in his highly critical essay, points to this exact phenomena, but he frames it through the lens of confirmation bias.
Right.
Manson argues that the law of attraction is really just confirmation bias on steroids. We naturally tend to notice and pay attention to things that confirm our pre-existing beliefs.
So if you aggressively convince yourself that you are a highly successful person,
You will selectively notice the positive feedback in your environment that confirms that identity while ignoring the rejections.
it reminds me of the analogy of the archer. It's like shooting an arrow into a blank wall and then walking up and painting a bullseye around wherever the arrow landed and claiming you hit a bullseye.
Yes, you are retroactively confirming your own success by selectively framing reality.
That paints a very accurate picture of the cognitive loop at work. But, I mean, while it sounds like self-delusion, that manufactured confidence actually leads to real-world action, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the academic source supports this by bringing in Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory from positive psychology.
Broaden and build.
Yeah, this theory explores how different emotions physically affect our cognitive processing.
Okay, so I imagine fear or anxiety gives us tunnel vision, right? Like we focus entirely on the immediate threat, like a looming bill.
Exactly. Negative emotions narrow our thought-action repertoire. We go into survival mode.
Makes sense.
But Fredrickson's theory posits that experiencing positive emotions, like the deep hope, joy, and relief you feel when you vividly visualize achieving your goals, does the opposite. It psychologically broadens your peripheral vision.
Oh, wow.
You become more creative, you connect disparate ideas more easily, and you build stronger social resources because you are projecting optimism.
So practically speaking, if you go to a networking event stressed out about debt, you might only talk to one person, stare at your phone, and leave early.
Right.
But if you go in fueled by the positive visualization of The Secret, you are relaxed, engaging, and way more likely to spot a lucrative partnership. You aren't attracting the goal through a cosmic frequency. You are putting yourself in an optimized psychological state to go out and physically grab the goal yourself.
Exactly. The neuroscience and psychology provide a very grounded explanation for why the methods can be effective. You're basically hacking your own cognitive biases to stay motivated.
That makes complete sense. It strips away the magic but replaces it with actionable, empowering science. But, and this is a big but, we really have to address the massive shadow hanging over this.
Yes, we do.
Because life isn't just winning runs and $10 million checks. So what does this all mean when things go inevitably wrong? What happens when a hurricane destroys your home, or you get laid off, or you get a terrifying medical diagnosis?
Well, this is where the heavy critiques of the book come into play. And the sources show that the fallout can be severe. Mark Manson's review is absolutely scathing on this front.
I read some of his review. It is intense.
It really is. He refers to the book as the staggering bullshit of The Secret, and he famously calls it McDonald's for the mind.
McDonald's for the mind.
Yeah.
That is such a visceral description. It implies it's, fast, cheap, makes you feel a dopamine hit for a few minutes, but a steady diet of it will ultimately destroy your health.
Which is the entire core of his argument. Manson warns of the extreme dangers of delusional positivity.
Because The Secret demands that you don't think negatively.
Right. It demands that its practitioners never indulge in negative thoughts or acknowledge doubt because acknowledging failure supposedly attracts failure. Manson argues this is disastrous for basic human decision-making.
Because it actively encourages people to ignore massive red flags.
Precisely.
If you are starting a business and the accounting looks terrible, or you are in a romantic relationship with someone exhibiting toxic behavior, The Secret basically tells you to look the other way and just visualize the positive.
It completely disables your critical thinking. And both Manson and the Culture Journal point out a much darker ethical consequence of this philosophy, which is severe victim blaming.
Oh, yeah.
It is the inescapable logical conclusion of the law of attraction. If your thoughts entirely create your reality, then what does that say about people suffering from generational poverty, systemic inequality, or terminal illness?
The philosophy essentially says that it is their own fault. They just didn't have the right vibrations. It's a profoundly cruel worldview because it completely ignores socioeconomic realities, genetics, and plain bad luck. It allows someone who is successful to feel superior while telling someone who is suffering that they brought it upon themselves.
It really is. And Manson provides some chilling, real-world examples of how this detachment from reality plays out.
Like what?
Well, he recounts the story of a woman who tried to test the book's claims by manifesting away her pollen allergies.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she stopped taking her necessary medication, relied entirely on positive visualization, and predictably ended up with a severe, painful sinus infection.
I mean, you can't just wish away a biological response. He also brings up that terrifying hypothetical scenario about a cancer researcher, right?
Yes.
Imagine a scientist testing a new drug. The clinical trials are failing, the data looks bad, but because the researcher is a devout follower of The Secret, they ignore the negative data. Because to acknowledge the failure of the drug would mean emitting a negative frequency and doubting the universe.
Which obviously compromises the integrity of the science and puts lives at risk.
Absolutely. That detachment from reality doesn't just result in bad financial or medical decisions. It fundamentally rewires a person's moral compass.
It does.
When you believe you are the sole architect of reality, you isolate yourself from community and accountability. And that is exactly what triggered the massive theological backlash we see in our next source.
It's a seamless transition into the religious critique.
Hmm.
Donald S. Whitney, writing for the Banner of Truth, analyzes the book strictly from a conservative Christian framework.
Right.
His analysis is incredibly thorough, and he essentially labels The Secret as prosperity theology without God.
He argues that the book borrows heavily from various historical heresies to build its framework, doesn't he?
He does. First, he identifies it as fundamentally pantheistic, because Byrne equates the universe with the divine, removing the concept of a personal, distinct creator. Everything is just one big energy soup.
Which goes back to treating the universe as a giant cosmic vending machine that just dispenses whatever frequency you punch in.
Exactly. Second, Whitney argues the book operates on Gnosticism. Gnosticism is an ancient belief system centered on the idea that salvation or enlightenment only comes from secret, esoteric knowledge held by an elite few.
And the marketing of the book plays right into that.
Oh, completely.
They literally called it The Secret. They presented it as hidden knowledge suppressed by elites, and the only way you, the average person, can access it is by paying the guru their book fee. It's a very old psychological trick.
The marketing mirrors the Gnostic approach perfectly. But Whitney's primary and most urgent concern is that the book actively encourages what he calls self-deification.
Making yourself a god.
Yes, by telling readers that their minds control the physical universe, and by using phrases throughout the text like, "you are God in a physical body," the book attempts to replace the need for a savior or any higher moral accountability with the belief that the reader themselves is a deity.
Wow. If you truly believe you are the master of the universe, you don't need to answer to anyone else. Your desires become the ultimate moral good.
And if we step back and look at the bigger picture here, a really profound realization emerges from the sources. You have Mark Manson, a secular, heavily tattooed blogger and psychologist who relies on modern cognitive science. On the other hand, you have Donald S. Whitney, a traditional conservative theologian measuring the culture against ancient scripture. They are operating from completely opposite ends of the ideological and cultural spectrum.
Yet they arrive at the exact same fatal flaw.
They do. Both the secular and the theological critiques conclude that The Secret breeds a dangerous, blinding level of self-absorption.
That is so interesting.
Whether you label it extreme narcissism from a psychological standpoint or self-deification from a theological standpoint, the resulting damage is identical. It creates an unhealthy obsession with the self at the severe expense of reality, ethical responsibility, and human empathy.
When you think you are a god, you stop caring about your neighbors. That is a massive takeaway. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with Rhonda Byrne's intense personal trauma, traced how she repackaged 19th century New Thought into a $65 million empire, explored how the practices actually hijack the brain's reticular activating system to manufacture confidence, and then dug deep into the very real ethical dangers of toxic positivity and self-deification.
Synthesizing the metaphysical claims with the psychological realities paints a very clear picture of why this phenomenon exploded the way it did.
So how do we synthesize this for you, the listener? How do you actually extract the tangible value out of the concepts in The Secret without falling into its delusional traps?
It's all about balance.
Right. Based on the balance of all our sources, the path forward seems to be adopting its focus on intense gratitude, hyper-clear goal setting, and optimistic visualization. Those aren't magic. They are proven cognitive tools. They prime your brain's filter and they give you the emotional buoyancy to pursue hard things.
But the vital caveat is to remember that manifestation in the real world is never passive. You cannot simply think your way to a new reality while waiting on the couch.
No cosmic mail order catalog.
Exactly. As the psychological literature demonstrates, belief must be coupled with relentless, inspired action. You use the visualization to prime your brain's RAS, but then you have to step into the world and do the physical work.
Absolutely.
Furthermore, you absolutely must cultivate the emotional resilience to face reality when things go wrong. Because they will. Hardship is inevitable, and ignoring red flags is a recipe for disaster, not a strategy for success.
You have to keep your eyes wide open, even when the data or the circumstances aren't what you visualized. Which brings us to the end of today's deep dive into The Secret. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought experiment to mull over, building on everything we've unpacked regarding the mechanics of this philosophy.
The logical extremes of these theories are always the best way to test them.
Right. So consider this scenario. If the law of attraction dictates as an absolute law of physics that the universe will inevitably bend to give us whatever we focus our dominant thoughts on, what happens when two totally different people use The Secret to manifest winning the exact same job?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Or imagine two rival athletes, both vibrating at the perfect frequency, visualizing winning the exact same championship trophy on the same day.
Yeah.
If both are doing everything right according to the book, whose universe wins?